So chapter 1. A is from an island that has been left off the map of the world. It is the place where all the letters of the alphabet come from. And this is where our story begins, with a Mr. Tiger and a little girl called Betsy K. Glory, and a rather large moon. The letters of the alphabet had asked Mr. Tiger if he would like to help them write down his story. He was far too busy. The letters of the alphabet also asked Betsy. She said she was far too young. As for the moon, well, that would have just been plain silly. So it was left up to the letters of the alphabet themselves to tell the story. For there are more than enough letters to make every word ever needed. They decided that as O is the first letter of many a fairy tale, O should begin with once upon a time. There was a little girl called Betsy K. Glory. She had purple hair, bright, shiny green eyes, rosy cheeks, and a sweet, freckly face. Her mum, Myrtle, was a mermaid. Alas, she had not taken well to dry land and didn't have freckles. Her father, Mr. Alfonso Glory, had done his very best to make his mermaid bride happy. But there is such a difference between sea and pavements, between having 2 feet and a mermaid's tail, that in the end, Betsy's dad and Betsy's mum both agreed to a parting of the waves. Betsy's mum went back to her home under the sea, while Betsy, who didn't have a mermaid's tail, stayed on land with her dad. They lived in a tall, windy house above Mr. Glory's cafe. It was built on the quayside overlooking the sea. It was the most famous cafe on the island. Mr. Glory was known for making the most wondrous ice creams, more delicious than any you have ever tasted. His crackle galore flavours, his chocolate cream wizards, his ribbly raspberry wonder were the stuff of dreams. So famous was Mr. Glory's ice cream that people came from every corner of the island to eat there. Even though the island had been left off the map of the world, it hadn't stopped word spreading that Mr. Glory was the king of ice cream makers. Betsy lived a charmed life. The island was a peaceful place to grow up. It had sandy beaches, a blue ocean, and nothing horrible ever happened there. Her mum often came to visit, and on warm days, they would go off swimming together in the sea. We agree, it was somewhat sad that Betsy's mum couldn't live with them. In all honesty, it wasn't so sad that Betsy wasn't happy, or she didn't feel loved. And although it would be good to always write stories that are about pleasant things, unfortunately, there would be very little to say. Except that the sun shone every day, that the rain rained every night, and that Betsy's favourite day of the week was Wednesday. Chapter 2. But before we go any further, the letters of the alphabet want to say they were always busy. Not just writing this story. They were needed for all sorts of other important things, like the daily news. That is how Dad and Betsy first heard that Mr. Tiger and his circus were to arrive on Wednesday. But the trouble was, the letters of the alphabet weren't quite sure which Wednesday that was. Or more to the point, what kind of circus he would bring with him. Perhaps they didn't know because when Wednesday came, there was neither sight of Mr. Tiger nor sound of his circus. Wednesday was the day Betsy's mum would pop out of the sea. Betsy would wait for her on the harbour steps, and together they would dabble feet and fin in the water. That is, until Dad turned up to carry Mum back to his cafe. Here she would sit at one of the little tables under a shady umbrella with her tail in a bucket. Betsy wondered if Mum knew anything about Mr. Tiger and his circus. But Mum had a faraway look in her eyes that had more to do with orcas and oceans than circuses. "Do you think Mr. Tiger has animals?" asked Betsy. Before Mum could answer, Dad appeared with an ice cream he'd made especially for her. He had called it Myrtle's Minty Mumbo Marvel. "It tastes of wishes," said Mum. "Delicious, mouth-watering wishes." "What would you wish for, Mum?" asked Betsy. "If you had a wish, I mean." Mum thought about this for a minute and said, "I have everything I could wish for. A beautiful daughter, a loving husband. What more could a mermaid really want?" "Legs?" suggested Betsy. Mum laughed. "Then I wouldn't be me, and you wouldn't be you." "I hadn't really thought of that," said Betsy. "That's why," said Mum, "you have to be careful what you wish for." Betsy asked her dad what he would wish for. "Nothing," he said. "I have Mum and I have you. Anyway, a wish is very hard indeed to find." Betsy wondered if there was a place where wishes were made. If there was, said Dad, he didn't know about it. Mum knew of an island where gongalong bushes grew. It was said that if the fruit was made into ice cream, you could make a wish from just one scoop, and whatever you wished for would come true. "Then we should go there," said Betsy, "and we can pick gongalong berries when they are ripe. Dad could make them into ice cream." "Why?" asked Mum. "Why would we need to do that when we have everything we want here on the seashore and in the tall, windy house on the island, left off the map of the world? I just thought a spare wish might be useful." Mum gave Betsy a hug. "But the island is as far away as Sunday," she said. "And I hear on the seaweed line that a bossy giantess rules it." "That wouldn't stop Dad, would it?" said Betsy. Dad was very good at making ice cream, but not so sure about giants, bossy or not. "Wait a minute," said Mum. "There is something else important, but what it is I can't remember. It has something to do with how you pick the gongalong berries." She thought long and hard, but it had, for the present, swum away from her. Later that day, as the sun was putting on its red pyjamas and settling down for the night, Dad carried Mum back to the sea. He and Betsy waved farewell and watched as she disappeared beneath the white-kissed waves. Betsy looked out of her window and up into a sweet shop of stars. She was about to climb back into bed when, to her delight, she saw a star whiz across the black treacle sky. Closing her eyes, she said, "I wish Mr. Tiger and his circus would come tomorrow."